Somewhere in most homes, there is a room, a cupboard, a corner of a garage, or a collection of boxes in a spare bedroom that nobody talks about directly, but everyone in the household is quietly aware of. It holds the accumulated items of years or decades, things kept out of obligation, things kept because getting rid of them felt like a decision that could wait, things that arrived at some point and simply never left. It is the kind of space that most people plan to deal with someday, in the vague future, when there is more time and more energy, and the task feels less overwhelming than it does today. In Sweden, there is a word for the practice of deliberately addressing that accumulation, not in a frantic weekend purge or a guilt-driven decluttering spiral, but thoughtfully, gradually, and with a clarity of purpose that most approaches to tidying never achieve. The word is Döstädning, and it translates literally as death cleaning. The concept was introduced to an international audience through the work of Margareta Magnusson, a Swedish artist who published a book describing the practice as the art of clearing out your home with consideration for those who will come after you. The title is deliberately confrontational, but the philosophy behind it is the opposite of morbid. It is deeply practical, surprisingly gentle, and according to research from Stockholm University on possession attachment and cognitive load, one of the most effective frameworks for permanently reducing the burden that accumulated possessions place on daily life, not just on those left behind when someone is gone. Today we are exploring 11 Swedish death cleaning hacks that quietly fix everyday problems in a home right now, not just someday, because the genuine insight of Döstädning is not that it is preparation for dying, it is that it is preparation for living more clearly in the space you already have. Let us start with the practice that most people avoid longest and benefit most from addressing first. 1. The question that changes every decision. Who would want this after me? Döstädning begins with a single question that is more clarifying than any sorting category or organizational system. If I were gone tomorrow, would anyone I care about actually want this? Not could someone theoretically use it? Not was it expensive when it was bought? Not does it have an emotional history attached to it? But would someone I actually know and love genuinely want this in their life? This question works as an organizing tool because it bypasses the justifications that make ordinary decluttering so slow and emotionally difficult. Most people keep things because getting rid of them feels like a definitive action that might turn out to be a mistake. The Döstädning question reframes the decision. Keeping something that no one would want is the action that requires justification, and the default becomes removal rather than retention. In practice, applying this question to a box of old items in a spare room takes far less time than applying conventional keep or discard logic, because the question is immediately answerable for most things. The stack of newspapers from 15 years ago? No. The box of unmatched Tupperware lids? No. The collection of cables for devices nobody owns anymore? No. The specific cookbook inherited from a grandparent with handwritten notes in the margins? Yes. The question sorts accurately and quickly, and it does so without requiring an emotional interrogation of every item. It simply asks whether the item has a future, and for most accumulated items, the honest answer is immediately clear. 2. The box of secrets. The most loving thing you can do for your household. Every home has a category of personal items whose significance is entirely private. Journals, letters, old photographs of people nobody else in the household would recognize. Documents that were important at a particular life moment but have no ongoing relevance. Items with meaning that exists only in the mind of the person who kept them. Döstädning addresses this category with a specific practice that has no equivalent in conventional decluttering. The box of secrets. A clearly labeled box is created, set aside, and designated for items that are meant only for the owner's eyes and should be destroyed after the owner is gone rather than sorted through by others. The box is not hidden, and it is not secretive in a concerning sense. It is labeled clearly so that those handling an estate after death know its contents are not meant to be examined. The practice of creating this box serves the living as much as it serves those who will come after. Knowing that private items have a designated place and a clear instruction attached to them removes a low-level background anxiety that many people carry about what will happen to their most personal possessions. It also provides a clear physical boundary. Items that belong in the box of secrets go into it, and the question of what to do with them is permanently resolved. For items outside the box, the sorting becomes cleaner and faster because the private category has already been handled. 3. Start with the easy categories. The Döstädning momentum rule. One of the most consistent mistakes in conventional decluttering is beginning with the hardest categories: sentimental items, photographs, inherited objects, things with complicated emotional histories. The Döstädning approach, confirmed by the research on possession attachment that informs Magnusson's methodology, begins with the easiest categories and uses the momentum and confidence gained there to approach harder categories later. The easiest categories are the ones with no emotional weight attached: duplicate kitchen tools, expired pantry items, single shoes without partners, cables for devices long since gone, magazines older than 2 years, clothes with broken zippers or missing buttons that were meant to be repaired and never were. Starting here produces immediate, visible results with minimal emotional effort. The cleared space and the physical lightening of the room are genuinely motivating. The successful decision-making practice established in easy categories, the experience of evaluating an item and acting on the decision without regret, builds the confidence and decision-making capacity needed for harder categories later. Conventional decluttering systems often fail because they begin in the middle of the difficulty curve. Döstädning begins at the beginning of it, which makes the process sustainable rather than emotionally exhausting from the first hour. 4. The one room, one session rule. The pace that makes Döstädning permanent. Döstädning is explicitly not a weekend project. It is not meant to be completed in a burst of motivated energy, followed by an equal burst of exhausted regret. Magnusson's approach and the Swedish cultural practice of death cleaning more broadly treat it as an ongoing process measured in months rather than days, with each session addressing a specific and bounded area of the home rather than attempting to process everything at once. The practical rule that emerges from this approach is one room, one session. A session might be 2 hours, it might be 4, but it addresses one room, or one section of a room, completely before moving on. The benefit of this pacing is both psychological and practical. Psychologically, completing one room produces a clear and visible result that makes the next session feel motivated rather than daunting. Practically, a complete room processed once requires no revisiting. The decisions have been made and the items either remain with purpose or have left the home. The slow pace also allows time for the decisions made in one session to settle before the next one begins. Items removed from a room in one session that were kept out of genuine uncertainty rather than genuine attachment can be revisited in a subsequent session rather than generating permanent regret that undermines the entire process. The Döstädning pace is calibrated to produce permanent results rather than fast ones, and the distinction is significant for anyone who has completed a rapid decluttering weekend and watched the same accumulations return within 6 months. 5. The gift while living practice. Passing things on before they become obligations. One of the most distinctive and practically effective aspects of Döstädning is the practice of deliberately giving meaningful objects to the people who would receive them eventually anyway, but doing so now, while the giver is alive to see the recipient enjoy them. A piece of furniture that a child or friend has always admired, a collection of books that a sibling would genuinely read, a set of tools that a neighbor has been borrowing for years. Kitchenware that a young household starting out would genuinely use every day. The practice serves the living home in 2 ways. First, it physically reduces the number of items in the home right now, creating space and simplicity that benefits the current household rather than waiting to benefit an estate. Second, it generates a specific kind of satisfaction that conventional decluttering never provides. The knowledge that an item went to someone who wanted it, rather than the ambiguity of a charity shop donation or the finality of disposal. Research on the psychology of giving from Stockholm University notes that the act of giving a meaningful possession to a known recipient, while alive, is experienced as significantly more satisfying than the theoretical knowledge that the same item would eventually be inherited. The Döstädning practice of gifting while living converts this research finding into a practical organizing tool. Items leave the home with purpose and warmth rather than difficulty and ambiguity. 6. The photograph before letting go. Preserving memory without preserving the object. One of the most consistent barriers to letting go of accumulated items is the fear that releasing a physical object means releasing the memory or the emotional connection attached to it. Döstädning addresses this directly with a practice that is simple, immediate, and remarkably effective. Before releasing an item with emotional significance, photograph it. Not to create a digital archive that will never be looked at, but to acknowledge consciously that the memory being held is held in the mind, not in the object, and that the photograph is sufficient proof that the item existed and mattered. A child's drawing kept in a box for 30 years because throwing it away feels like erasing a moment, photographed and then released. A collection of birthday cards accumulated over decades with no clear purpose beyond their accumulated presence, photographed as a collection, then released. A piece of clothing with strong emotional history that no longer fits and will never be worn again, photographed, then released. The practice does not work for every item with sentimental significance. Some items genuinely warrant physical keeping because their three-dimensional presence is the point rather than the memory attached to them. But for the large proportion of sentimental items kept primarily out of the anxiety of forgetting, the photograph resolves the anxiety while allowing the physical burden to be released. It is one of the most practically useful tools in the Döstädning approach, and one of the most immediately applicable to everyday organizing rather than only end-of-life planning. 7. The 10% rule. Reducing slowly enough that nothing is regretted. One of the recurring failures in conventional decluttering is the overcorrection. Removing too much too quickly in a moment of motivated energy, then experiencing regret and gradually replacing the removed items because the home no longer feels comfortable or fully functional. Döstädning's slower pace naturally prevents this, but for homes beginning the process, a specific guiding principle helps calibrate the pace of removal. The 10% rule. In each session, aim to remove approximately 10% of the items in the area being addressed. Not 25%, not half. Not everything that is not immediately obviously essential. 10%. This rate of reduction is slow enough that regret is rare. Removing one item in 10 from a category leaves the category fully functional and adequately stocked. Over multiple sessions, 10% reductions compound. A room addressed 4 times at 10% per session has reduced its contents by roughly a third without any single session requiring the kind of aggressive decision-making that produces regret. The rule also prevents the paralysis that comes from attempting to make every possible decision at once. 10% is achievable in any session regardless of emotional state or available time. It requires no heroic motivation. It simply requires showing up for the session and making a small number of decisions consistently, which is exactly the pace that Döstädning is designed to sustain. 8. The drawer audit. Addressing the accumulated small things that nobody ever deals with. Every home has several drawers that operate as gravitational fields for small miscellaneous items: the kitchen junk drawer, the bedside table drawer, the desk drawer in the home office, the bathroom cabinet drawer that holds everything that does not have a better home. These drawers are typically the least organized areas in any home, and the most resistant to conventional organizing approaches because their contents are too varied and too small to sort by conventional category. Döstädning addresses drawer accumulation with a specific approach. Each item is removed individually and held in the hand while the Döstädning question is applied. Does this have a specific use in this home right now? Not potentially, not theoretically, not if a specific situation arises someday. Right now. Items that have a specific current use are returned to the drawer in a designated section with similar items. Items that do not have a specific current use are removed from the home. The drawer audit, applied to one drawer per session, produces visible and immediate results that motivate subsequent sessions. More importantly, it addresses the category of accumulated items that most decluttering approaches either ignore or handle poorly. The small, miscellaneous, individually unremarkable things that collectively create a home that feels subtly burdened and cluttered even when the visible spaces look organized. 9. The Paper Reduction Project. Addressing the heaviest accumulated weight in most homes. Paper is frequently the heaviest accumulated category in homes kept over several decades. Bills, statements, receipts, instruction manuals, warranties, correspondence, printed photographs, documents from resolved situations, and paperwork whose original purpose has long since been fulfilled. Döstädning treats paper reduction as a dedicated project rather than a component of general tidying because the decisions involved are specific and require a different kind of attention than physical objects. The Döstädning approach to paper begins with 3 categories: documents that have legal or financial permanence and must be kept physically, documents that can be digitized and then destroyed, and documents that serve no ongoing purpose and can be destroyed immediately. Most homes working through accumulated paper discover that the 3rd category, documents serving no ongoing purpose, constitutes the majority of what they have been keeping. Old utility bills from 15 years ago, instruction manuals for appliances no longer owned, receipts from purchases made in previous decades, correspondence from resolved situations, warranties for items long since disposed of. These items require no scanning and no filing. They require only the confidence to remove them, which is easier when the Döstädning question is applied. Would anyone I care about need this after me? For the vast majority of accumulated paper, the answer is unambiguously no, and the decision becomes straightforward. 10. The furniture consideration. Asking whether each large piece earns its floor space. Furniture is the category of possessions that receives the least scrutiny in most homes because it feels permanent and structurally necessary rather than optional and removable. Döstädning applies the same question to furniture that it applies to smaller possessions. Does this piece earn its place? Not in the sense of mere occupation of floor space, but in the sense of genuine daily utility that justifies that footprint. A chair that no one sits in, a cabinet that holds items that would find homes elsewhere, a desk used only to accumulate surface clutter because the work it was purchased for moved elsewhere, a bookcase holding books that no longer reflect the interests of the household and are kept purely because they arrived. Each of these pieces occupies floor space that could be open space. An open space in a home has a value that most furniture assessments never account for. It makes cleaning faster, movement easier, and the room feel visually calmer. The Döstädning furniture consideration does not require removing all furniture that is not in constant daily use. It requires an honest audit of whether each piece serves its purpose or merely occupies its footprint, and making deliberate decisions about each piece rather than treating all furniture as permanent infrastructure that falls outside the scope of home simplification. 11. The maintenance gift. Leaving a home that others can love rather than manage. The final Döstädning hack is the one that gives the entire practice its deepest meaning and most lasting motivation. Magnusson's original framing of death cleaning is explicitly about leaving a home that the people who come after you, whether family members, a future tenant, or simply the next chapter of your own life, can inhabit comfortably rather than spending their first months managing your accumulated decisions. This reframing of home organization as a gift rather than a chore changes the emotional relationship to the process in a way that is genuinely sustaining rather than temporarily motivating. When clearing a room is understood as creating something that will benefit someone you care about, the items removed feel less like losses and more like preparations, When simplifying a storage area is understood as reducing the burden on a future version of yourself or your household, the effort required feels purposeful rather than arbitrary. The maintenance gift is not a technique, it is a perspective, but it is the perspective that makes all 10 of the previous techniques sustainable over the months and years that Döstädning is designed to take. Not because it makes the decisions easier, but because it makes the reason for those decisions clear and consistently motivating. A home that has been thoughtfully simplified through Döstädning is not an emptier home. It is a more livable one, organized around what is genuinely used, genuinely valued, and genuinely worth keeping, rather than around the accumulated evidence of decades of postponed decisions. Looking at all 11 of these Döstädning practices together, the picture that emerges is not one of loss or limitation. It is one of extraordinary practical gain. A home where every possession has been consciously chosen to remain is a home that takes significantly less time to clean, significantly less cognitive energy to navigate, and significantly less emotional energy to maintain. The question that began this video, "Who would want this after me?" turns out to be one of the most useful organizing questions ever applied to a home. Not because it invokes mortality, but because it cuts through every other justification for keeping something and arrives immediately at the one that matters. Genuine future value to someone real. Döstädning is not about dying. It is about choosing, deliberately and kindly, what your home is going to hold and why. Which of these 11 practices feels most applicable to something in your home right now? Let us know in the comments. We would genuinely like to hear which corner of your home you are thinking about as you watch this. And if you enjoy discovering the deep and quiet wisdom in Nordic approaches to everyday life, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We will see you in the next one.